4 fish that you need to start thinking about getting pretty soon, if not right now, because I know at least I forget half the time every year, and then I'm always bummed out about it. These fish are gonna be great for keeping outdoors if your climate's gonna allow it this spring and summer, but they're also good fish for inside too, just in a normal aquarium. Actually, I think one of them might be kind of a terrible idea, but we'll talk about it. First fish I want to talk about is one of my favorites. It's the golden white cloud minnow. Not to be confused with the normal white cloud minnow, the sort of like grayish one that has red markings, or even like the long fin version of this fish. Don't get me wrong, they're cool too, but the golden white cloud minnows just really stand out in the outdoor setting, in the pond setting. I think they're one of the best fish for keeping outdoors. They were my favorite for a super long time until I fell in love with another fish, which is also on the list, and I'm sure you probably already know what I'm gonna talk about. But these fish are really cool, again, mostly because they look awesome from the top, they look awesome from the sides. Not every fish is meant to be viewed from the top. And I'm not sure that the golden white cloud minnow was specifically bred to be this way. I think it's just something that it accidentally kept with it, but these fish are awesome in a pond setting. You can see them from a mile away, something that you don't get from like the normal white cloud minnows. You can totally keep those fish outside as well. They're all gonna be a cold tolerant fish, so even if you wanna keep them in a normal aquarium in your house, if you don't like to use heaters, if you keep it cool in the wintertime, it's in the mid 60s, like those fish are gonna thrive in that type of environment. And luckily for me and you, if you like to do outdoor pond stuff in the spring and summer, the white cloud is also a really good fish for that. They're not going to be as tolerant as some of the other fish in the wintertime, but I keep mine mostly throughout all the summer without air stones. The water gets warm, even in the mid 90s, they seem to do just fine. So being both heat and cold tolerant, I think they make an awesome fish that you should probably start thinking about getting right now, because if you wait too long, I am a victim of this. I do this to myself almost every year with at least one type of fish. I wake up, it's like somehow almost the end of June. Not too late to go get new fish and set up ponds, but it's always more fun if you're on it early in the spring. So here's where we've had the Minnow Colony. I'll probably refer to them as that. I've had these fish for a super long time, at least most of the adults. They've been in the fish tank that is solely powered by the sun. I know we do have a little light on here. That's only for times like this when I really want to like show it off, but yeah, they've been chilling in here. They're not a fish that are probably gonna make it in most people's winter times. Like even mine, it would have to be a very mild winter if I expected most of them to survive. So I usually just pull them out at some point. Like it depends on how the year's going. But these fish, very, very cool. Love these guys. Every year I seem to get just enough to keep the population going, like about like this. They will eat most of the babies that they produce, but every so often, like a few will survive, right? And so that's good. That means that they're the best fish. Like they have the highest fitness. They can survive the constant predation by the parents. And then of course, sometimes, if I do see them, then I try and pull them out. I play fish god a little bit, but yeah, no, these are awesome fish. We'll probably put these outside in a pond here at some point. I just don't want to do it like too soon because it still is a little chilly at nighttime. I don't want to shock them too hard. The recent sun we've been having, the peace lilies really starting to shoot out some new leaves. Most of the other plants have not done as well as maybe I thought they would. I don't really know what I was expecting with this, mostly an experiment, but having these two sides, I just felt like it was something we had to try. So nothing's like really dying off too hard. Like things are super stunted. Again, probably not enough light. It's been wintertime, but things aren't dead. So that's cool. The sword is still there. The hair grass is hanging on by a thread, but it's not dying. It's just chilling. So maybe we'll let this run for a little bit longer. We'll get a little bit more into the springtime and see if there's like an explosion of life, like if the plants just need a little bit more sun. But at some point, we'll probably move this whole thing outside. We'll put something different in it because the minnows have their own dedicated home. So here's the old minnow pond that we set up last season. I think we made this thing up in like the end of May, so kind of late, but I mean, spring sometimes doesn't hit where I live until about that time anyway. The last few days have actually been like up in the 70s with no clouds in the sky, super sunny, which is weird. I really got close to putting some fish out here. I almost introduced the minnows back out to this pond, but then I remembered that it is still March, so still basically kind of winter time where I live. had to fight the urge to do it. But this pond is already set up, and I think we're gonna continue this one on. I don't think we're gonna gut it or do anything crazy like that, because we just don't really need to. I still need to get in here. I'll probably change the water, get in here, clean up some of the dying plant leaves and things that have been decaying in here all winter. Other than that, there's just not really much else to do. So this is just a planter pot. I think it probably holds 12 gallons. That's being really generous. Once you start to put in stuff like these bigger pond plants, then you really do lose a decent amount of space, at least swimming space for the fish. But for 15 minnows, this is plenty of water volume for them. It's no big deal. I'm pretty sure these are the only 2 plants that we had in here, other than what we planted down in the substrate that did not survive. So we got the creeping Jenny that made it through this entire thing freezing over. The iris as well seemed like it could tolerate that. Should have prefaced this with that we took all of the minnows out of this pond. We didn't subject them to a completely frozen environment. They definitely can't tolerate that. I don't even know if they can tolerate the top freezing over that much. I think they're kind of one of those fish that are right on the line of maybe some really healthy ones could tolerate that and survive if that was the case for only a very short amount of time. But I've never had success, even where I live, keeping them outside. So just keep that in mind. But I'm pretty sure all of those fish are going to get reintroduced to this. We might keep a couple inside because I want to try and do a little bit of some breeding with them. Because if we just put them back in here as an egg scatterer, they're just going to shoot, hundreds, thousands of eggs all over this thing. And it's going to be pretty impossible to collect those, at least after the fact. So I don't know exactly what we're going to do with the minnows this season, but I have, there's a really cool video I saw of how to do an auto collect with egg scatterers. I'll put a link for it down in the comments so you can check it out. So we're going to try and do that inside. Big shout out to the YouTube algorithm and also Sydney's Angels who made the video on how to do that. We'll probably follow up with that here in a few weeks or maybe months. I don't know. It just depends on how this weather goes. Only other things to note about the little minnow pond is probably the fact that we're raising some of these plants up with just some random pavers, and I think there might also be a brick in here, so the water hardness is a little bit harder, which is actually kind of good for me because my tap water is super soft. And then you probably notice that we have some water movement, so we do have this little solar pump that's hiding in the back here. Not sure if you can see that. It's just rigged up here to this solar panel that gets hit with sun for most of the day. Water movement, not super important, but I think one thing that is really important is that this pond is primarily in the shade. Yeah, we got some plants and stuff behind it that kind of help out, but with the sun in the summertime, what time is it right now? 1 or 2? It's going to change, right? Because the earth tilts or whatever, but it doesn't get a ton of light. It doesn't get a ton of direct sunlight, only in the morning, if that makes sense. Keeping your ponds out of direct sunlight is I think the #1 thing you can do to make sure that they don't get just absolutely destroyed by algae. So don't sleep too hard on the golden white cloud minnow. Again, a fish that is something that maybe you could keep out throughout the entire winter if your climate is going to allow it. Keep that in mind. Really great fish, I think, for both ponds and aquariums. #2, not in any particular order here, because the rice fish are probably my #1 if I had to list them, is of course the rice fish. I fell in love with rice fish last summer. I don't know how I didn't know how awesome they were. I don't know how I got to this point. But as soon as I figured it out, all the things clicked. They instantly became my favorite pond fish and one of my favorite aquarium fish just in general, from the cool look that the fish can have, the way it behaves outside, the way the sun transforms the top of the fish and just really hypes up the colors in them, to the breeding aspect of the rice fish. I think is super interesting and cool. Unlike the egg scatterer type reproductive methods of the white cloud minnows and some of the other fish we're going to talk about, these are specific egg depositors. So again, using making the mops, putting the mops into specific tanks where we're trying to intentionally breed, I just think is so cool. The rice fish is a little bit more of an expensive fish. It hasn't really taken off like it has in Japan here in the United States, unfortunately, but hopefully with time, we'll start to get more cool subspecies and color variants of the fish over here. And I think that's gonna help to reduce the price a little bit, but they can be a spendy fish, but they're super hardy. So chances are when you get these fish in, they're gonna be healthy for a very long time, especially if you keep them indoors, because the ones that you get from wherever you get them from, they're going to be tailored to wanting to be in more stable conditions. They're not going to be all meant to be fish that can survive a really cold, freezing winter and a super, super hot summer with maybe without aeration. So if you spend a bunch of money on rice fish, you're worried about your climate, you're not sure, you haven't done a winter or a full summer with them yet, then you can of course bring them inside. You can park them in the garage in the winter to try and not have everything totally freeze over and protect those maybe weaker fish that wouldn't survive outside. But it's just a journey that you have to kind of figure out for yourself, because obviously we all live in different places, and you know, if your climate isn't very similar to Japan's, I don't think anybody's really is. You have to kind of figure out how you're going to navigate a winter and maybe even navigate a summer. And that's just part of kind of the fun of these fish. But I think they're excellent for keeping indoors, keeping outdoors, because that's just really how they're meant to be kept. But it's up to you. It's your hobby, and I think they're a great fish for everybody pretty much. Sorry, the backyard is still kind of a crazy mess. But we have our rice fish ponds. We have 2 back here right now. This is the main one I got in last weekend and did some cleanup to it. I just came in and took out some of the dying plant material that was in there, all the sylvinia that didn't make the freeze. Tried to pull out as much of the duckweed too as possible. I'm not sure if we're gonna have this be a 100% breeding setup, like if we're gonna put plants back in it or if we're gonna leave it bare and just go with the mops. But even though it is March, you're gonna notice a decent amount of algae in this one covering the sidewalls and even down like on the rocks at the bottom. And that's mostly because of the position of this pond. So I moved this thing. It's getting way more sunlight than it normally would. I'm pretty sure last summer it was positioned over here, which is more of a shaded area. So all this algae is stuff that basically popped up like in the last few weeks. The sun doesn't need to be very strong for an algae outbreak to occur. And you know, like something like this that has had just a bunch of decaying stuff in it, it's a recipe for algae. So I'm not worried about that. We could get in and we could scrape the walls. I just didn't do that when I came in and did the initial maintenance. But the fish are all doing good. They're swimming around. I hope we have some males and some females in the mix here. I think we should have at least 1 or 2 of these fish being females. If I can remember correctly with what we had before, we did lose 2 of the fish before like any of the freezing happened. So they were fish that just weren't meant to make a winter. And that's something that you'll probably come across like when you're buying these fish from sources. They're not fish that have been through a winter like this. So chances are you're going to probably lose a couple, but we ended up doing pretty good. Like, you know, all of our fish didn't die or anything. So they're chilling, they're doing good. We have another rice fish pond over here in the corner that has way less algae in it because it's just way more shaded. Black Medaka's in here, and we got a little bit of mondo grass that made the freeze. I pulled everything else out though. There was 1 dwarf sage it looks like that survived. Still need to do like a water change on this guy. But these rice fish, they're the best fish to do in this kind of a setting because they look the best from the top, I think. You can get some variety in them, and then their ability to resist the freeze is just so crazy. So, I mean, with these ponds, we didn't get as much freezing because we put the lid over the top. Still kind of trying to figure out how that all worked. Like, there wasn't anything else special that we did to it. I don't think the greenhouse effect should have worked as well as it did. I don't know. Nature kind of did me a solid, I guess. But we did have the top completely frozen over, probably close to 1 inch. And then what shocked me kind of after that top froze is that we actually had like an ice wall around both of these rice fish tubs. So I don't think it was necessarily that much warmer down lower. Kind of crazy, but the rice fish did survive. Like, they did a very good job. And I know it sounds cruel, like why would you subject them to this in the first place? But this is just the way that this fish is kept. It's how they do it in Japan. It's how you ensure that the genetics are going to hold through and be good for multiple generations. And it also just makes them breed stronger in the summer. They need this period of like very cold water to just chill and not do anything so that they can be better in the summertime. Like, it's just what they're meant to do. We have a bunch of rice fish. These are all juveniles and babies that we grew up from last year from the various ponds that we had. So they're going to be getting ready to go outside. I still got to go through and select the best ones, the ones that we want to breed this summer. Got some more tubs up here with some smaller ones. We did a little bit of indoor breeding with the kois just because we needed a bunch more because they don't breed true. You only get like 1 true koi out of like 20 fish that you get. So we have a bunch of more ponds to set up, but yeah, you can keep all of these fish inside year round if you want to. Just know that you're gonna get the best results out of the rice fish if you do at least give them several months of colder temperature. If you can put them in the garage, like expose them to a little bit of some colder environment. That's gonna go a long way. I also cleaned up this pond this weekend, trying to get it ready. I think this is gonna be where we're gonna put all of the not so perfect rice fish from all the spawns last year, just because I don't have the heart to do an actual cull on them. So I think we're just gonna put a bunch of mixed rice fish in here and see how many we can get. Like, they're gonna breed too. Like, there's probably gonna be a lot of fish in here by the time the summer's over. I think I already mentioned it, but the selection of rice fish that we have here in the US isn't nearly as good as like the international selection. But you're going to be looking at like platinums or all white fish. You're going to be looking at midnights, all black fish. Yokihi is another one that's going to be an all orange fish. That's really cool. And then beyond that, I mean, you're going to see things like daisy rice fish, which I think, don't at me too hard here if I'm wrong, but I think is a different species or comes from a different part of the world. There's a few others that you're going to see on different websites depending on where you look. I have no affiliation with Aquahuna whatsoever other than me just buying fish from them. But that's where I've gotten some of my koi rice fish. That's another type that's really cool. Also a little bit more expensive. But if you're somebody who's just into cool fish, different fish, fish that you haven't had before, breeding fish, I mean, rice fish just kind of check all the boxes. Plus the fact that depending on where you live, you can probably keep them outside year round, I think is really cool. Unless you live in Minnesota, which if that's the case, anybody in the Midwest, you're probably going to have to do some pretty big modifications, at least in the wintertime, because you can't have them completely freeze over. The next fish that you should probably think maybe about getting soon. This is going to be specifically for the pond. Probably not a great aquarium fish, although I'm sure there's people that do keep them in tanks, and if you're that person, let me know what your experience is with them. But that's going to be just the plain old dull mosquito fish. These fish look like a really dull guppy. I think the females actually get substantially bigger than most female guppies, while the males, they stay small, just kind of like a normal guppy. But they are exactly what I just said. They are a very dull looking guppy. They're obviously a live bear. They have the full setup for it. It looks almost like a mosquito fish is what started guppies evolutionarily, but I don't think that's correct. They are the fish that people will just put into ponds to solely eat mosquito larvae to help control the mosquito population in the summer. And so I think it's cool just to have a fish that actually serves like a very utilitarian purpose. And actually, you can get mosquito fish maybe for free from like your local whatever Fish and Wildlife thing you have in your state. At least for my state, I can go online and I don't know actually if I can get them to ship them to me, but I can go to the main office and just get a bunch of mosquito fish for free. I think that's actually something that I'm gonna do for a video here at some point this summer, just because I think it would be kind of cool. I don't know what the quality of those fish are gonna be. I don't know. I've never seen a mosquito fish for sale in a fish store, or at least if I have, I didn't pay any attention to it because obviously it's not something that I think everybody wants to put in their home aquarium. But for ponds, I mean, they're kind of essential. And depending on where you live, I mean, you can live anywhere. You're going to have a mosquito issue if you have bodies of water outside. So all of the fish that we're talking about today will pick and do a halfway decent job at eating mosquito larvae. It obviously depends on like where you live and what kind of a mosquito problem you have in your area. I've had people tell me that they're from Texas and there's no way that a handful of rice fish in a bucket would be able to keep up with the amount of mosquitoes they have being generated in there. I'm not about to tell that person that they're wrong because I have no idea, but for me where I live, the amount of fish that I keep in the bodies of water that I have around my house, I don't have an issue with mosquitoes hatching up out. So that's my 2 cents on the whole thing. Don't really know a lot more about them because I haven't ever kept them or had an experience with them, but we're going to be getting these here pretty soon, I think. I'll have to check and see if we can get those free ones from the government. The previous 2 fish we just talked about, I already have, but this last fish that I wanted to mention, I think might actually be the coolest looking one from definitely an aquarium side-on perspective. Not sure how good they look from the top. We'll see how that turns out. This is a fish that I kind of learned about being an awesome fish for me late last season. So I didn't have the opportunity, or I didn't want to at least get them like at the end of July because we're sort of running out of time at that point. The fish I'm talking about is the rainbow shiner. So this is a beautiful looking fish. Again, never had them before. I don't have any footage to show you, just cool pictures that hopefully aren't photoshopped too much. I'm sure these have a little bit of Photoshop magic going on them. I don't think when you get these fish, they're gonna look like this. They might look more like this when you first get them when they're younger. But I think if this fish can turn even half as good as this picture looks, then this is gonna be an awesome fish. Like I can't wait to see if we can get them looking like that. You know, we might have to feed them a little extra legit fish food to try and get them to look that good. But I think overall, this could be one of the coolest fish that I'm definitely getting like next week. Did a little bit of research on this fish. Turns out it's an egg scatterer, so similar to our golden white cloud minnows. So if we want to do some breeding with them, we're gonna have to adopt sort of the same techniques that we use to actually capture the eggs from the females that lay them. Another cold tolerant fish, very similar kind of to a minnow, like from a body plan perspective. Obviously there's a different finnage, different coloration, right? But these fish are stunning. Like the purple, the blues, the kind of like magenta's red, right? I mean, these things look like galaxies exploded and it's on a fish somehow. I don't know, I'm just really pumped for these. I think they're the most excited I've been for a fish since the whole rice fish thing happened to me last year. And yeah, I'm just stoked to get them into a pond and see how they look from the top view. Like hopefully those darker colors don't get drowned out. Kind of like what happened to me when I had my pond in the greenhouse at the old house. Put cherry barbs in there. I thought the cherry barbs would be a nice pop of color, a little pop of color red. But that dark red just sort of got swallowed up by, I think maybe the fact that there wasn't any above head lighting, like at least in the shade. They just sort of disappeared in the water. They were very dark. But time will tell. I'm optimistic. And I think worst case scenario, they live outside. They breed for me a little bit without too much intervention. Some of the babies get to survive, like sort of like how the minnows do. And then we just get a few extra. We bring them in like we do with the minnows at the end of the summertime. And then we just have more really cool fish that are super colorful that we get to enjoy in the normal aquarium setting. So I don't know. Yeah, those are the 4 fish that I think you need to probably start thinking about getting now. What is it? I know it's only like the end of March, but if you're like me, you're gonna close your eyes, open them, and it's gonna be the end of June already. So I would just go ahead and get them now, put them in some holding tanks if you have them, and just get them prepared for the summertime, the spring and the summertime, because it's almost here. Depending on where you live, it might already be here. You might already be in full-blown, like, it's almost 80 degrees outside every day. I don't know. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the video today, guys. Had some computer issues this week, kind of held me back, and hopefully this managed to get out to you on Sunday. But yeah, anyway, thanks again for watching, guys. We'll see you next week with maybe a build video. I don't know, the fish room's almost kind of coming around, but was springtime coming? I mean, I'm already starting to focus on outside stuff, so I have no idea. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.